If you're like me, you may get nostalgic over certain video games. For me, the one that I always come back to is Mario Party 2 and Mario Party 3. Just growing up, whenever I would have a sleepover with friends, we would be up all night playing Mario Party. There's other games like Super Smash, or the first time I played the Ocarina of Time, I was playing with my dad. But as a Call of Duty player, nostalgia plays a huge factor as well. People always say these older games were better, but are we ever going back there? Most likely not. And this video by Big Fried TV, we haven't watched one of his videos in a while, is about that. I've watched maybe the first 30, 40 seconds, and instead of me watching it alone, I thought I would bring you guys along for the ride. So let's see what this is all about.
Schreier's new book, Play Nice, about...
You don't know who Jason Schreier is? He's probably one of the most video game journalists, most reputable people in that front. As far as Call of Duty goes, he's ahead of the curve on a bunch of that stuff.
The rise, fall, and future of Blizzard, and how they came up as a
Call of Duty.
ragtag group of friends to become one of the most influential game development outfits in history, and how the business side of things changed the way they operated and what led to their fall from grace in the eyes of fans. Now, there's a lot of lessons that you can extrapolate from this book, but the general sense that I felt in the first half was kind of inspiring, like reading stories about them taking their time to craft some of the most incredible franchises in history was amazing, and it was truly
I don't think people realize how huge Blizzard was and like how ahead of their time they were. There hasn't been a game like World of Warcraft that has run off of a subscription model ever. And it was so early on that happened, and how big it was. People just don't understand those numbers.
A wonderful read. The second half of the book details the merger with Activision and how guys like Bobby Kotick and other execs at Activision push to, quote, extract as much value out of their IPs as humanly possible.
That's where things get bad.
Pushing the developers to release World of Warcraft expansions every year under the guise of serving players at the detriment of the developers' well-being, with things like massive crunch and lack of time to really innovate and do anything creatively. Wondering why things like BlizzCon exist when they don't make money, wondering why they have teams working on other games when their main moneymaker is World of Warcraft and everybody should just be on World of Warcraft. And as a longtime fan of WoW, it actually confirms everything that I felt I knew about the IP and how they're putting profit over everything else. It's something we all knew, but reading about it.
As soon as you become a publicly traded company, that is what is going to be above everything else. And you have to try to hire people into your company that aren't just about that, which is hard because if you hire someone who's not about that, they're probably going to get fired.
And actually hearing about conversations happening in boardrooms from people who were in those boardrooms is fucking insane to me. The latest expansion was awesome, but like in previous years, I felt that like I played through the campaign main story and then everything else just kind of falls apart for me because it feels like it's formulaic, assembly line feeling for everything just for the sake of content. What made Blizzard so...
Holy, that hits home with Call of Duty so hard. Like if we look at like season 1 for Black Ops 6 is coming out, it's right around the corner. Like actually think about it. Assembly line products. Pretty much every single season we get the same stuff. And then basically over the last year, I think what they realize, we just want more. So instead of having 2 maps at the beginning of season, we now have 3. And instead of having 3 weapons throughout the season, we now have 7. It just pump up production, pump up assembly, more people will come.
Great in the 90s and the early 2000s isn't what they believe in now. And the thing is as I'm reading this book, I'm sitting here thinking like, you can take this mentality and throw it at almost every single AAA developer in the business.
Nailed it.
Your EAs, your Ubisofts, your Microsofts, your Sonys. And what I struggle with is feeling like none of this stuff matters. The discussions that we've had here over the years about Ubisoft and their downfall and their missteps and trying to make it known that...
Okay, here's the thing though, is I think it does matter though. Like I think it does. Like more than ever, we are seeing the downfall of these huge companies.
This is what gamers want, and you got to stop focusing on profit. The shit doesn't matter. Check this out. An article from Games Industry Biz was released discussing the Ubisoft 24-25 half-year results. This just came out the other day, and how Ubisoft has been underperforming.
Hugely.
In it, Ubisoft revealed that they lowered their headcount by over 2,000 employees over the past 12 to 24 months, which is a lot when it comes to one company.
Huge.
Until you realize that it lowered their employee count to a mere 18,600 and change.
That's still so many.
18,000 employees for a company that is putting out absolute garbage year after year. Seeing that number laid out in that article blew my fucking mind, because like, how do we expect them to not focus on profit when they have a company like a machine?
That's what I'm saying. As soon as you become so big, it's not just, you can look at content creators for this as well, right? Like when I started out, it's just me in my basement and I have a laptop, right? And then, okay, YouTube's doing well. Let's buy a bigger computer. Like that's a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 computer. Well, we got to pay for that. Okay, well now I need to buy a camera. My camera is $2,000 to start out, but then I need like a $3,000 lens. I've got 2 lights. I've got this entire backdrop, and now I have a house. Now I got to pay for this house. Okay, things are still doing well. Let's get an editor. Let's get a thumbnail creator. Well, you got to pay them too. And all of a sudden, it's not just a reliance on you to make good content. It's a reliance on you to pay these other people, pay for these things, maybe take care of a family. It's no longer just one thing. And then imagine 18,000 employees on top of that. Whew.
Not so well oiled, but a machine nonetheless, running at that kind of bloated level. What I realize is that these companies actually just don't give a shit about anything but the bottom dollar.
They can't.
And it's one of those things, like, we've talked about it for years, and there's this hope that like maybe something will change and maybe Ubisoft will learn their lesson and maybe things will shift. And seeing those kind of numbers and reading this book and seeing the conversations that are happening behind closed doors, these companies truly, genuinely do not give a single fuck about anything that goes on in this comment section, in this video, online.
Is that true?
On forums.
I hope he dives further into that.
Not
like with like,
and I'm sitting here reading things about what people
maybe
were
I need to
saying
read
about
this
Bobby
book.
Kotick in the early days of Activision, and how they basically took this yearly format with things like Call of Duty.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here and I'm conflicted, because I look around the landscape in terms of FPS, and this is where the big confliction lies for me. Is Call of Duty is dropping games every single year.
Yeah.
Yes, they are formulaic. Yes, they are cookie cutter Call of Duty rinse and repeats. But when you look around and you look at the
I hope he
indie
says what he's
space,
gonna
the
say.
AA space,
What I think he's gonna
AAA,
say.
everything in between, there's nobody touching a game like Call of Duty.
it's exactly what I was going to say. Yes, they come out every single year. Yes, some of them suck, but no game. I won't even, not even keeping it in first person shooters. No game comes out every year with as many changes, different maps, modes, anything like Call of Duty does. There's not a single game out there that can do that. And Bobby Kotick, horrible dude, but to be able to make that happen, you gotta at least, maybe you just care about the money, but you care enough about the money to do that.
Duty, which is where my confliction lies. It's like Call of Duty is a very polished product, but it's simply because they churn them out year in and year out, and we're losing the idea of working on a video game franchise for years on end to put out a really creative.
Okay, devil's advocate here. People also hate that. When look at Elder Scrolls. Okay, we're gonna make a great game, but it's gonna take us 15 years to make. Nobody wants to wait for that. It's the complete opposite of what he's saying.
Innovative, polished product. You know, I've been sitting here wondering like where the innovation is in the industry. And the truth is, like,
It's there.
that's over. If you're around my age going into your mid 30s, you know that like we grew up in a time where people were making games. They were on the cusp
Well,
of.
that's because there was nothing, right? You're starting with nothing. And like, I think like innovation is going to come in with maybe VR or maybe things like that. It'll still happen. Just when you start from nothing, it's going to happen a lot faster than when you already have a baseline.
Something that I don't actually think they even realized they were involved in at the time. But we watched them make these games because they truly cared about the art. They truly cared about the fans. And they truly.
This is one thing I do know. Maybe top level, they don't care about the game itself anymore. But the people who are actually in the trenches working on the game, they legitimately care about what they are creating. That those 18,000 employees, 17,000 of them legitimately care. The top executives, probably not. But everyone who's actually in the studio working every single day, 95% of them really do care.
Really cared about making innovative products that people could enjoy. And nowadays, it's all about the bottom line. It's all about the dollars. It's all about profit over absolutely everything else. Because once these companies go public,
also,
they have to
he needs to play on a
continually
larger
make
field of view
steady
here.
increases in revenue quarter after quarter, year after year. And if you don't do that, you're fucked. There was one part in Play Nice where Bobby Kotick was pissed off that Blizzard's revenues weren't as predictable as something like Call of Duty's or Activision's, where one year they would make $700 and something million. The next year they would make $5 million. Then the next year they would make $800
just depending on what's releases.
The next year they would make $6 million.
Okay, so but here's what I don't understand about that. I feel as though Blizzard would probably be the most predictable company because of the subscription model from WoW. No, am I wrong there?
Go up, it would go down, it would go up and go down, and they were mad about it, as if making hundreds of millions of dollars is a bad fucking thing. And it blew my mind that they sent people down to Irvine to like actually go in and investigate what's going on when a company made $600 million in a year, but it wasn't as much as last year's. And I know this happens everywhere. I know the book is talking about Blizzard, but I know this is happening everywhere. And like, I realize now, man, we're fucked. I don't really talk about this or bring this up at all on this channel because we mainly focus on FPS here, but I'm a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm a huge fan of Magic the Gathering. And both of those IPs have been threatened by these corporate overlords in the past. And there's one thing that I'm very proud of when it comes to at least the Dungeons and Dragons community. They fought back against Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast doing things that were just inherently against the community's wishes and very anti-consumer when it came to locking down community created content. And the crazy thing is Dungeons and Dragons is built off of user generated and created content, worlds, characters, items, all homebrew. Like that is the basis of Dungeons and Dragons. And if Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast want to step on that, the people will just tell them to go fuck themselves and they'll just do it themselves. Unlike what we're seeing with Magic the Gathering, where
it's
we're
not
now
like a video game where you
of
can't.
like crossover stuff with a bunch of different IPs. A lot of people are pissed off about it. Magic the Gathering has been a money printer for their shareholders for years, decades now. But now we're watching that shift happen to where monetization is now over everything else. It's over the community wishes. It's over even the lore of Magic the Gathering. And instead of focusing on creating incredible, Magic sets, year in and year out, we're now seeing the introduction of things like Marvel, Spider-Man, and SpongeBob.
I think Lord of the Rings was a big one that they did recently.
SquarePants literally be involved in Magic the Gathering formats. And it's just another one of those instances where the company is, instead of focusing on harnessing what the community really
don't get me wrong, I love me some SpongeBob, but when you really...
and that's magic and lore and setting and great sets, they're choosing to go for profits because they have the licensing deals, they collaborate with all of these other companies, and it's all just becoming one major advertising conglomerate. And the reason I bring this up is because it's not only happening in the gaming space, but this channel is a gaming centric channel. And I had to share my thoughts on it because it's getting increasingly more and more difficult to look at the gaming industry and feel hope for the future, because these companies are incredibly bloated to the point where I feel like 18,000 employees at Ubisoft is completely unsustainable. But we
especially
also
for
see that
Ubisoft,
stuff
man,
in things like Blizzard and EA and Activision and Microsoft. These companies are so massive now because we were the ones that put them on the map in the early 90s and the 2000s. We bought the games when they were creative and innovative and new. And then those companies ballooned and ballooned and ballooned. And in the case of Blizzard, they weren't ready for the ballooning that a game like World of Warcraft gave them. They literally said they were printing more money than the US Treasury, which is insane. And so the problem is
what?
We grew up in the best time to be a gamer because we watched the innovation, the creativity, and the passion.
Like I said at the beginning of this video, a lot of what he is saying here is nostalgia. I guarantee you someone who is 12 to 15 right now, in 10, 15 years, they're going to look back and say, we grew up in the best time for video games. We had like all of these games that are Baldur's Gate, like the Dark Souls franchise, like all of this stuff. People are going to be like, we lived in the glory days. And then 15 years after that, same thing. Nostalgia is a huge thing. The difference is the beginning of WoW and all of this stuff is when video games started. So you're never going to be able to get that back because they're always going to have this baseline.
Be put into the products only to have those companies blow up so massively because of our love that they had to shift to be able to sustain the business.
That's
and
true.
Put profit over everything else. And you can see the trajectory through this book, and you can take what
and
happened
that's not
to Blizzard,
only in the video
you can
game
apply
industry.
it to almost every major gaming organization in this industry. And it's sad. It's sad that like there is no hope for the future of the AAA space.
Maybe.
And it's one of those things like we have talked about
AAA
it
wise,
for years.
maybe.
You know, and then in reading the book, it really just kind of re-solidified my thoughts because I've been slipping. I've been trying to find the positivity. I've been trying to find the future. Where are we going? How do we innovate in the space when expectations are that we need to innovate, we need to grow massive, we need to do bigger and better and bigger and better and bigger and better? But then we can't focus on profit because once you start focusing on profit, that's when the creativity, it's an insane conundrum that we're in right now. And I don't really see a way out. And so my answer here would be like, well, let's focus.
Man, like what is that answer, right? Like if you say like go to non-AAA titles, I mean, they can only make so good of a game. Like, don't get me wrong. My favorite game ever, I think, is Stardew Valley. Completely different than what I normally play, but God, made by one guy, right? But if you look at Stardew Valley compared to like a Call of Duty or a WoW, it's like night and day difference.
On the indies, let's shift and look over there. But realistically, outside of a few games that have already been out for years now, there's not a lot of fresh experiences and there's not a lot of things on the horizon. And although I do feel like supporting the indie space is the way forward, I think everybody just needs to come to grips with the fact that things are never going back to the way they used to be.
Yeah.
And if you have a love and a passion for games like I do, you will be here through the good, through the great, and through the worst, trying to find fun moments that you can have either with yourself or with your friends, because that's all we really have left. I've been reading this book because it's been invoking a lot of emotion in me, not only as a YouTuber and somebody who has been literally preaching to the fucking choir with you guys for years on end, but also as somebody who is going through their own trials and tribulations with game development, working on our own project, and as a fan of...
I don't think I'm smart enough to develop a game, but it'd be cool. I could write one hell of a story for a first-person shooter. I could do that. That I could do.
Games themselves. I'm watching myself look around at the world and realize that we are never going back. So the only way to move forward, in my opinion, is to find games that you can have a good time with, that don't cost a lot of money, that don't nickel and dime you every fucking chance they get.
On that note, I know this is late in the video and maybe many of you haven't got here. If you did, let me know down in the comments. But one problem that video games have, like specifically, I know this one for Call of Duty, is having too many hands in the cookie jar. Like when it comes to writing a story for Call of Duty, they have a lead writer, but then so many people underneath, and they'll spitball ideas all around, but the lead writer will decide which one actually go through, and specifically higher ups in like Activision will decide which goes through, what's politically acceptable, all of this kind of stuff. So there's no longer just like one person writing the game. It's like a bunch of people and only certain things go through. And I think you can really see that in Black Ops 6. Like the different missions were almost like written by different people and like don't line up quite as perfectly as they should. And it kind of works for Black Ops because everything's redacted. But I think that's a big problem with Call of Duty. And no longer do you just have like that one person writing the story. And I think that's like one of the downfalls of the Call of Duty story as a whole.
Being made and developed by passionate individuals who only have an interest in trying to recapture even a little bit of that magic that we had growing up, even though we all know at the bottom of our hearts, it will never be the same. It's been tough watching the industry shit itself the way that it has. It's been tough.
It really did over the past couple of years.
Everything that we have been saying is 100% true. when it comes to these corporate suits who really just don't give a shit about anything but profit, infecting and swarming to this industry because they saw the money coming in from passionate fans giving their money to passionate developers, and they wanted a piece of the pie. This video was mainly just a rant. I've been reading through this book, and it's been, like I said, it's been humbling. It's been inspiring.
Maybe consider getting that book. It sounds good.
It's been very, very sad at times watching a company that, like, I grew up watching Blizzard. Like, Blizzard was incredible. I grew up playing the early World of Warcraft days where it was fucking phenomenal. And much like everything else that we watched growing up at the time, every single time they just kind of fall from grace. And as somebody who is trying to balance,
I would love to like actually have a conversation with him and be like, in your opinion, when did that fall from grace actually
finding
happen?
Fun times, being positive while also trying to critique and call out shit. It's a very fine line to walk. But reading this book over the last few days has made me really, really sad, because a part of me wants to go back to the old days where things
Nostalgia.
were different.
That's what we started
all
with.
Aspects of life. Not only just in video games, but dude, I felt like the movies were better back then. Music was better back then. Everything was better back then. But is that just
okay? Now you just sound like a disgruntled old man. I mean, I do that all the time, but like
me being old man yelling at clouds again, because my parents felt the same way. And their parents felt the same way. I think that's where like nostalgia kind of comes into play a little bit. Was it nostalgia? Reading through this book, there's a large part of my heart that says it wasn't. And so at the end of the day, if you're somebody who has either fallen out of games or you're just watching this industry,
this is actually like a really good sales pitch for this
load with hatred in your heart. Trust me, first off, I get it. But also, I think we should just relish in the fact that a lot of us grew up in the best time to play video games, in the best time to have experienced what it felt like to be at the cusp and at the brink of new technologies coming into play at the rapid pace that they did. I'm blessed that I was a part of it, and I'm glad that I got to experience it. I do wish that we could go back, but I also recognize now that we can't. I appreciate you guys watching, man. Shout out to every single one of you who have subscribed to the channel throughout the years, and for allowing me to vent and discuss ideas like this and talk about the future, talk about the past, and just get my ideas out into the world. My name is Big Fry, and I'll see you on the next one.
Oh, that was a jump. No, it's an interesting debate, right? Whether nostalgia is clouding your judgment when it comes to this. I think it's abundantly clear that the way that the video games industry has gone is money over good products. And yeah, sometimes the good products make the money, but in the end, once your company, once whatever you are working on becomes big enough, you need to financially support it. And people want more and more content. People would love if I put out 6 videos a day. Okay, maybe not that many, but a lot of videos. I can't do that alone. And like, yeah, I do most of my own stuff in-house, right? But look at Call of Duty, for example. I don't know if many of you know this. Most of their cutscenes, they hire another company to create them. Like, they write them and stuff and they record the voice, but then they send them to an animation studio and they make the cutscenes. That costs a lot of money. So they need to make money. So to create these products that we want, the money needs to be there. And like, that's, I think, a disconnect for a lot of people. But let me know what you think. And that was a great video. Go check out Big Fry.